to introduce you to our next speaker, who will talk about Canadian business opportunities in Central America, Mr. Sebastián Seguin. Mr. Seguin is the Executive Director of the Central America, Cuba, and Dominican Republic Integrated Programs at Global Affairs Canada, GAC, and is responsible for advancing Canada's foreign trade and development priorities in the region. Mr. Seguin has a PhD and a master's degree in international relations from the Graduate Institute in Geneva, Switzerland, as well as a postgraduate degree, MBA, in organizational management from Université Laval and a law degree from Université de Sherbrooke in Canada. Welcome, Mr. Seguin.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes hoy. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. But I'm not alone. I have very important colleagues of mine who are also part of this segment of today. And I will just mention them, and you'll have the opportunity to hear from them and to speak with them in a minute, because they are really the ones who can actually talk a lot more about business opportunities in Central America. But first, my colleague Carolina Gay, who's our ambassador to El Salvador and de facto our trade commissioner for today, but very active in that country. We also have Tammy Amos, who's our trade commissioner, very big portfolio, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Nicaragua. We have my colleague Bruno Hamel, who's our trade commissioner in Guatemala. And last but not least, my colleague Ross Firla, who's our trade commissioner in Panama. Now, I'm going to hopefully try to do this because I usually don't use it on Zoom, but I'm looking to share screen. So I'm going to try to share a very bureaucratic presentation. So let me know if you host disable share screen. So it doesn't let me share my screen. Are you able to help me, Mariana? It doesn't let me share my screen.
Of course, our IT team is on it. Please confirm that you can do it right now.
Aha. This is the screen that I want to share. Can you see that?
Perfectly.
Okay, so let me kickstart this. And I'm sorry, I'm not as technically savvy as I would like. So you see my screen?
Yes, we do. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So as stakeholders who are very much interested in Central America, I think what I'm about to say are things that you actually know, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I'm going to talk for about 5-6 minutes, and then I'm going to turn to my colleagues to talk about business opportunities. But obviously, Ambassador Ortiz, buenos dias, embajador, mentioned it, but I think Central America is a region that certainly saw decades of progress. Mention was made of the Civil War in the 80s, or so really substantive progress, economic and social progress over the last few decades. But there are still very significant challenges. And I think particularly the COVID-19 pandemic certainly has showed a lot of those, put into light a lot of those challenges and a lot of the fragility that we have in the institutions. We see some authoritarian tendencies, political polarization. But generally speaking as well, there's still very strong challenges when it comes to corruptions, to violence, lack of respect for human rights, poverty, inequality, and a very fragile capacity to react to climate change. So it is a very fragile region, kind of unstable. And from a Canadian perspective, it is also of concern because it is also a main transit for illicit drugs, for organized crime, and just generally speaking, instability. Canada is a player, but it's not the big player, and I think I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But there's obviously the U.S., who is a much bigger player. Politically, but also economically, they offer a great market. And you can read, like everybody else, we certainly see China and Russia who are playing also an increasing both economic and political influence. So there are really big players in the field that do take a lot of space. But I think there's still an opportunity for Canada to be a partner of choice. First of all, I think Canada has a brand advantage. We are a trusted partner. We have a strong reputation. There's a lot of diaspora from Central America living in Canada with dual nationality or children's of or so on. So there's really that really strong people to people tie. We also have very modern trade agreements, free trade agreements with a number of countries. And you can see we have Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama, and there's ongoing discussions with others from the Pacific Alliance and Mercosur, which really creates a framework and a stability and comes with guarantees and requirements so that Canadian businesses can have a more predictable environment to do business in the region. And there are indeed many opportunities to increase the presence of Canadian businesses. I think these trade agreements I was referring to certainly provide that framework, to focus on SMEs, on indigenous-led, on women-led enterprises and companies. Canada also has the know-how and the reputation to engage in a number of sectors, but particularly, and this is one that is of great interest to Costa Rica, but also to other countries, digitalization, e-commerce, clean technology and innovation. And also, we have a vehicle in Canada that's really important, and it's the PPP, the public-private partnership, and arrangements that we can do, strategic arrangements that we can also do with partnership with partners such as the Canadian Commercial Corporations or Export Development Canada. So we have the expertise and we have the tools to do more business. And this segment started with a commercial from Scotiabank. That's also a very key partner that we have in the region, whether it's Scotiabank, but there's other Canadian banks that are very much present, like National Bank also. So those also offer great tools to facilitate trade and to facilitate trade with the region, and also to support Canadian businesses who want to do business in the region. But to be able to do business, you need to have a business conducive environment. And that's one of the key challenges that we see in the region. And that's one of the key challenges that we, as Government of Canada, are trying to address, is really to create the conditions for Canadian businesses to go in a predictable, in a transparent environment where they know who they are dealing with, they know what's going to happen, and they know that their investment are not going to disappear overnight. But there's a lot of work that is really needed on that front because of the challenges that I mentioned before. Many countries where there's a lot of corruptions, there's a lot of corruption or institutional corruption. How do you address that? How do you ensure that you address that so the Canadian businesses are not the victim of those corruption schemes? That's really an issue that we are trying to really address. We also work a lot on political and economic stability after the pandemic. It's no secret that the region was severely affected by the pandemic. As I said before, it really showed the fragility of their institutions. So now we're trying to work to build the strength, or to re-strengthen these institutions so that they can play an active role. We're also promoting, for example, responsible business conduct and dialogue on labor rights, so that again, Canadian businesses doing business in the region know that the conducts will be appropriate, know that the labor rights will be appropriate, and know that they will be able to find the kind of workforce that they need so that they can conduct their operations. We're also, and this is a big priority for Canada, but it's also a increasing priority in the region, is the whole issue of inclusive trade, because we do believe that by having more inclusive trade, that by having more gender equality and women playing a key role in businesses, I think that also is a great opportunity to strengthen our trade relation in the region. Just as a snapshot, because everybody likes figures, I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to give you a sense, so the direct investment in 2019 was about $6 billion in the region. and two-way trades were about $4.5 billion. Obviously, the investments vary. There's some countries where we're far more present, like Panama or Costa Rica or Guatemala, and others where I think we're building that presence, but it's going to take time for a variety of reasons. And you can see some of those, El Salvador, Honduras, and so on. Another source of, well, not directly related to you doing business in Central America, but obviously the temporary foreign workers program that we have in place, where we have, particularly from Guatemala, but more and more from other countries, these workers coming to Canada to really support Canadian food industry and food security, is also an important vehicle for this relationship and trade development in the region. So is student exchange and academic research. So I think we already have a good presence. And as you can see with some of the figures, there's particular area, I mentioned it before, where we are particularly more active and recognized. But really what's going to make a difference in your day-to-day life, it's not me sitting in my basement in Gatineau. It's really our trade commissioners and our trade commissioner service. And my colleagues who are with me on this segment, that's the day-to-day bread and butter. We have this network of trade commissioners around the globe who are there to really assist you, not only in understanding the market, but also in making the connection, finding the contacts, and also in serving as a liaison when needed to address arising challenges. You have the figures here, as you can see, how many we have in each of the parts of the world, but we have a substantive number all across Latin America and the Caribbean, and that's what these people do every day. I'm going to move to my colleagues right now, but I just wanted again to remind you of who they are. So for El Salvador, you see the names there, Carolina Gay, she'll be the next one to speak. Tammy Amos, Bruno Amel, and Ross Firla. So I'm going to end here, Mariana, if that's okay with you, and maybe we can turn to the to my colleagues, and after that we can take questions and answers.
Okay, wonderful. I would like to make a brief presentation on Ms. Gay. Ms. Gay is the ambassador of Canada to El Salvador. Ms. Gay joined the Canadian International Development Agency in 2007. She is currently Canada's ambassador to El Salvador since 2019, and between 2016 and 2019, she served in Guatemala as political counselor and was chargée des affaires for an extended period of time. She also served in Rwanda for 2009 to 2011 as a second secretary, development and vice consul. At headquarters, she was a project officer for humanitarian funding at the Afghanistan Task Force 2007-2009 program, managed for the Global Fund for Peace and Security on Colombia and Haiti from 2011 to 2013, and advisor to the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Americas from 2013 to 2014. Prior to entering the public service, she worked in Mali and Mozambique with non-governmental organizations and in the corporate social responsibility team of a Canadian engineering firm with project overseas. Mrs. Gay, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Mariana. Muchas gracias, Embajador Ortiz. Thank you, merci, Sebastian, and to all the organizers in the audience today. So I'm going to speak briefly about El Salvador and just put it in context. It is the smallest country in Central America, the third in terms of population. We're talking about 6 million people, and the fourth in terms of GDP after Panama, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. As Sebastian mentioned, we're on the smaller side in terms of two-way merchandise trade between Canada and El Salvador. We're talking here about $132 million approximately in 2019. Main products that Canada imports from El Salvador are textiles, electrical machinery, coffee, obviously, and live plants. And the three main Canadian exports products are paper products, cereals, and pharmaceuticals. And we're working very hard on expanding access to our agri-products, poultry, etc. There are limited number of Canadian investors, mainly in the business process outsourcing, retail store, and consulting engineering services. As Sebastian mentioned, there might be opportunities in terms of diaspora. We're talking here, El Salvador is the largest diaspora. El Salvadorians are the largest diaspora from Central America in Canada. It is a dollarized economy, which might be attractive for companies. I do have to say that since September 7th, so we're 6 weeks in, El Salvador has adopted Bitcoins as a legal tender. This is obviously uncharted territory. It's the first country to do so. And just for awareness, business can accept Bitcoins and keep them as such, or switch them, transfer them into US dollars using a government wallet up for transactions of up to $3,000. It is a strategic location and an airplane hub. It does have airlines servicing the rest of the region. It is El Salvador has done quite a bit of effort to update its regulatory framework to attract investment. Obviously, like every country in the region and in the world, the pandemic has affected its growth last year, but we're seeing a growth of 8% this year, according to the World Bank, and 4% again in 2022. So some good news in terms of recovery. There are challenges, and Sebastian pointed to many of them. Salvador has a very high level of debt right now. We're talking, according to the World Bank, of close to 91%, 92% in 2020. Fiscal pressures on balanced budget have affected credit ratings. The government is highly popular and has a supermajority in the Legislative Assembly, but there are heavy political tensions and also heavy criticism of institutional weakening. And we'll see, again, Bitcoins is so new, but there are concerns about its volatility. It might also bring new opportunities, obviously, and something that we're keeping tabs on. And then last point in terms of challenges, corruption always being one of them. El Salvador ranks 104th out of 180th in Transparency International's 2020 Corruption Perception Index. Now, in terms of opportunities, where we see some of the sectors that show progress promise, construction infrastructure, P3s, public-private partnership. This government has been very keen on launching P3s. It's unprecedented. They haven't done so before, and in the last year, they've launched 2. One airport cargo terminal, which has been awarded, and there's another bid in progress for video surveillance and highway lighting system, with more in the pipelines in terms of road, in terms of border crossings, in terms of government centers. So there might be opportunities there. Lots of interest in terms of green building. Construction companies are definitely looking into LEED, HOS, HEDGE guidelines, and looking into technologies and expertise that we might be able to offer. And in this post-pandemic context, like many countries in the region, looking at nearshoring, right? Looking at sort of Canadian companies and expertise and products, and from the construction perspective, housing, parts, wood, machinery, equipment. So might be some opportunities there. Clean tech and renewable energy. This government has, the government has implemented new incentives in order to attract investments in this context, including exemption in custom duties on importation of machinery equipment, or even on revenue or tax exemption on revenues derived from power generation. And last point I will make here is on ICT. Again, lots of investments on digitalization. So there might be interest from Canadian companies on supporting technology and expertise on e-government, digitalization, innovative programming, etc. So I will stop here, but just wanted to give sort of a brief overview of where we see future. I will say that I'm effectively, because we're a small mission, the Senior Trade Commissioner, but I am joined by a Trade Commissioner who just started, but has a long career in promoting investments and exports or imports into El Salvador. And her name is Celia Hernandez. So if you need any follow-up, it'll be a pleasure for her to help. Merci, thank you, gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Gay. And then we have Ms. Tammy Ames. Ms. Ames has served abroad as Trade Commissioner and Senior Trade Commissioner in the Czech Republic, Poland, Kuwait, and currently serves as a commercial counselor at the Canadian Embassy in Costa Rica, holding accreditation in Nicaragua and Honduras as well. She has also held several positions in Ottawa, Canada, at the headquarters of Global Affairs Canada, working in the European and US and Mexico Bilateral Commercial Relations Division, along with positions in Foreign Direct Investments, FDI, and Intergovernmental Commercial Cooperation. Mrs. M, the floor is yours.
Whoops, forgot to unmute. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Ortiz and the organizers of this event. As Sebastian noted, and you did, we cover 3 countries out of Costa Rica. So our trade commissioners are quite busy. Of course, Costa Rica is kind of our largest market, and we're here. So they joined the OECD in 2020, or were invited to join. I'm not sure of the exact state, but it will be imminent if it's not complete. So that makes that's quite a different beast to some of the other countries that we're working with. We do have a free trade agreement with Costa Rica. Unfortunately, it's I don't want to use the word old. We call it first generation. It was signed in 2002. So a lot of the things that have happened in the world since then, e-commerce, digitization, the focus on women in business, those things are new and not included in the agreement. So perhaps one day when we all have a moment to breathe and think, we'll be able to look at it again and update it so that it covers all of the areas that we could really collaborate with Costa Rica. As you can see, our priority sectors are pretty much everywhere. Agriculture and agri-food is our biggest import here in Costa Rica from Canada and vice versa. But we're starting to focus more on ICT, education, not only recruitment of students, but also collaboration between university institutions and joint research projects between different academics. Sorry, I just have to shut that. Infrastructure, clean tech, renewable energy, obviously in Costa Rica, that is a priority. They're well known for their renewable energy use and promotion. And so that's something we're looking at. It was mentioned P3s, that's a focus for us. We know Costa Rica is not alone in not having a lot of spare cash that the government can spend on the infrastructure needs for their people, and P3 is a really viable option for various countries, not only Costa Rica, but all of them in Latin America. And Canada has great experience there. The Canadian Commercial Corporation that Sebastian mentioned has been quite active here. They haven't yet signed a contract, but we're hoping to get something soon. And there's a lot of opportunities in wastewater, renewable energy, water, not only wastewater, but water sector. So we're hoping that we can keep pushing that forward and get some success there soon. On the investment front, there's not a lot of large investors here, but there's quite a few medium-sized Canadian investors, we'll say. In pretty much every sector, we have, from construction to clean tech, IT, recycling, education, medical devices. And that's something that the Costa Rican government in medical devices and life science has really been promoting. And it's working for them. They're becoming a real hub of life science investment here in Canada. There's a lot of incentives for life science companies to come here and set up. And I think we're seeing that. We recently had a big Canadian company, Bayless, announce that they are going to be opening a facility here. So we're happy to welcome them to Costa Rica. And I think that's an area where Costa Rica and CINDE, their investment agency, has really pushed forward and seen a lot of success. So Costa Rica, we're open for business. We're trying to get people to come, well, not come down yet to visit us in person. We are doing most things virtually, but my officers are very busy in the fall with a lot of events in IT and renewable energy and P3s and green building and all that exciting activities. So that's about it for Costa Rica. I'll have someone, okay, Honduras is next. As was noted, we handle Honduras from here. We do not have a person on the ground in Honduras, which makes it difficult. When I say overall business environment is difficult, part of that is the political climate, the the corruption, the lack of clarity on, the bureaucratic processes are still quite bureaucratic, if we will. I know countries are looking to streamline things and make improvements, but it's still difficult. And because we're not there, it's very difficult to really help companies the way we can in Costa Rica. We don't have the same contacts. People will find that in Latin America in general, people want face-to-face human contact. It's not countries where you can just phone up a stranger and think they will form a relationship with you over the phone. They want to meet you, they want to get to know you, and that's difficult from a distance. And just when we were starting to build up our relationship again, COVID-19 hit, and that's put us back a step. But hopefully, as vaccinations increase and travel opens up, we'll be able to get back into Honduras and start developing those relationships again. Once again, it's similar sectors of priority, and I think you'll find that for all of us here in Central America. There's nothing vastly different in most of our countries. They're all focusing on similar opportunities. They all have infrastructure needs, and those are areas where Canada has a lot of expertise, especially in, as I mentioned, the P3 and using the Canadian Commercial Corporation. We do have a free trade agreement with Honduras. It is newer. I think it was signed in 2013. So there is opportunity there, but again, it's difficult for us from a distance to really promote it the way we would like to. But it does include a lot of the newer aspects of free trade agreements that we think of today when we're signing agreements. Agriculture still number one, both directions. That's just the nature of the beast. Student recruitment is important in Honduras for us. We know a lot of Honduran families. I'm combining my Spanish and my English there. Honduran families send their children abroad for university education, and Canada is a popular destination for that. So hopefully now again that schools are going back to in person, Canada's opening it up, we will be able to have more people. We have limited Canadian investors. We don't have very many, but Gildan is our biggest investor. They are the biggest private sector employer in Honduras with nearly 30,000 employees in the San Pedro Sula area in the north. They're our flagship investor there, along with a few smaller investors in what do we say, fisheries, shrimp farming, and a few other smaller investments. So that's pretty much sums up Honduras. And then next is Nicaragua. Nicaragua is also a difficult business environment for many of the same reasons as Honduras. Also, right at this particular point in time, both Honduras and Nicaragua are very close to elections. I believe Honduras is at the end of November and Nicaragua in a couple of weeks. So that always puts a cramp in our style, because governments are kind of at a standstill during the election process. It is difficult for us. We're not there, but there are still opportunities. I mean, there's opportunities everywhere. It's just you have to have a little more fortitude to tackle some of these markets. And when people approach us, we try to give them the best advice that we can. We do not have a free trade agreement with Nicaragua. That's something that, it's a small market. I don't know if that'll happen. It'll perhaps be rolled into something of one of the larger free trade agreements that Canada is working on. Business opportunities, again, same thing: agriculture, agri-food, clean tech, infrastructure. All of those things exist in our countries, and we are active there. The one area that we aren't active in Costa Rica or Honduras is in mining. There are a couple of Canadian gold mines there, and they're doing very well. I know mining is an important part of the GDP for Nicaragua, and they contribute to that. They do a lot of corporate social responsibility activities. They're very active in their communities and trying to meet the needs while also being mining companies, which can be challenging for all of us. It's a smaller market, and we're hoping to get back after COVID eases up and the elections are over, and things can hopefully get our business back to normal, I would say. Well, as normal as we can in post-COVID-19. I have two amazing officers who really know their stuff here in Costa Rica, and hopefully we'll get some more people contacting us about doing business here or in any of the two countries. And we are happy to help them out in any way we can. So those are my three countries. Gracias.
Wonderful, Mrs. Ames. Thank you for your disposition. Then we have Mr. Bruno Hamel. Mr. Hamel is Commercial Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner of the Embassy of Canada, Guatemala, and Belize at the Canadian Embassy since August 2018. Career Foreign Service Officer for more than 20 years. He has been posted in Paris, Princeton, and New York, Havana, Boston, and Milan. Before joining Global Affairs Canada in 1997, Mr. Hamel was a lecturer in political science at the Université de Québec à Montréal at the bachelor and master level. Mr. Hamel, welcome.
I see Bruno said his audio is not working. So unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be able to present. I think I'll just speak on his behalf. I think his slides speak for themselves. So people can contact him if they want more information directly.
Thank you, Mrs. Ames.
Maybe, Mariana, if you agree, maybe we can move to Panama, and maybe Bruno can resolve the audio problem. And if not, as mentioned by Tammy, some of the information is there and I can put it back again.
Our IT department is contacting Mr. Hamel this second. Let me introduce you to Commercial Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner of Embassy of Canada to Panama, Mr. Ross Firla. In 2007, Mr. Firla began work as an economist with Finance Canada, focusing on environmental and natural resource development files. In 2010, Mr. Firla joined Global Affairs Canada as a desk officer responsible for a number of countries in Southeast Asia. In 2012, Mr. Firla began his first posting as a secretary and trade commissioner at Canada's High Commission in Malaysia, managing the education and agricultural sectors. In 2015, Mr. Firla returned to Ottawa to work in European energy issues and Canada's new trade strategy. Since 2018, he's the Commercial Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner of Canada's Embassy to Panama, leading commercial team to strengthen Canada's trade and investment presence in the areas of agriculture, mining, sustainable technologies, education, infrastructure, and security. Mr. Firla, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. Panama is, I think, in many respects, a comparatively strong economy within Latin America as a whole, and speaking more broadly, a relatively straightforward place to do business. We are one of the largest investment destinations for Canada in Central America. At the last count, there's an estimated 3.8 billion Canadian invested in Panama. Most of that is concentrated in Minera Panama, which is one of the largest mines opened in 2019 for production, and owned by Canada's First Quantum Minerals. But we do have some other investors already present, or companies who are very active in this market. in the areas of engineering and construction, in financial services. Scotiabank is very present here. Defense and security, among a number of others. We sell a significant amount of agricultural produce. We have every year we sell. Canada sells a significant amount of Christmas trees to Panama. It's very diversified overall, and generally balanced in Canada's favor. So generally we are within the embassy a fairly small team. There's two of us that cover what is a very broad array of sectors, very distinct sectors. And we try and stay on top of all the opportunities that are coming up. Obviously, Panama, like other countries across the region, was hit significantly by the COVID-19, and as a result, the economy contracted almost 20%, and unemployment went up about the same amount. That said, a prognosis for 2021 and 2022 are both paint a positive picture. The IMF estimates that Panama will grow, will have a partial recovery of perhaps 12% in this year, and maybe as much as 8 or 9% in 2022. And we, as an office here, we're already seeing a growth in opportunities across the sectors that we pursue proactively, as well as others in other responsive sectors that we have within Panama as well, and in particular infrastructure. So as Sebastian mentioned at the start of this presentation, public-private partnerships are an important mechanism for partnering with Panama or with countries here to help them achieve their infrastructure goals. Panama recently launched a public-private partnership office, which was actuated through legislation back in 2019. And they are developing a pipeline of projects that will not only serve the needs of Panama in terms of infrastructure development, but also contribute to the post-pandemic recovery. As well, in the area of clean tech, municipalities across the nation are looking at technologies to help them address problems with drinking water, wastewater management, as well as that of garbage and solid waste. They are looking at new and innovative solutions and new mechanisms to fund those solutions as well. For example, using gasification systems to basically neutralize garbage and then generate electricity as a result. For example, those sorts of technologies are things that would get a lot of traction. Mining as well. So as I mentioned, there's one significant mining property that has recently opened, but there are a number of others which are looking to potentially start construction in the next couple of years, which may generate opportunities for suppliers, and for other investors further down the line. Education for those who might be interested in providing ESL or capacity building in specific areas where Panama is lacking. Especially in the mining area where Panama has not historically been a mining nation, there are opportunities to provide that sort of training and capacity building, as well as in ESL. On a trade policy perspective, we've had a free trade agreement in place since 2013. Since the agreement came into place, bilateral trade flows have grown about 44% until just before the pandemic. And like in so many other places, the actual trade volumes declined significantly as a result of not only COVID, but also the restrictions that were placed on movement and businesses to control the impact of the pandemic. We expect with the recovery that's already seems to be underway, that our bilateral trade volumes will sort of resume their growth in the coming years, and hopefully we see a strong rebound. Like I said, our office is here to serve and aid any investors or companies seeking to do business here in Panama. Don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my colleague, Luis Cedeno, to help us assist you in your market entry strategies. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Firla. Unfortunately, Mr. Hamill doesn't have an audio connection, but he mentioned that anyone can feel free to reach out to him at bruno.hamill@international.gc.ca in order to discuss any business opportunities or investment interests that the participants would like to discuss. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. So I think this kind of concludes, as it says here on my screen, thank you. It does conclude the presentation part of it. And as mentioned at the beginning, I certainly would welcome questions from the participants. Hopefully there are questions I cannot answer, but that my colleagues who are the experts here can aptly respond to. So back to you, Mariana, and to questions from the large number of participants. I think we're something like 50. So back to you, Mariana.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. We actually have a question for Ms. Ames, and it says, why do you think there are so many small Canadian investors in the region, and particularly in Honduras, considering it has a newer free trade agreement? And then there's a second part to that question, but I'm gonna...
Okay. Yeah, good question. Why? I think part of that is just the difficult environment, that people aren't sure how to go about it. And there's a lot of similar countries with similar, I'll say, regimes or similar opportunities. So sometimes it's just a matter of the difficulty, and that they'll choose somewhere like Costa Rica or perhaps Panama, where things are a little more straightforward, a little easier, and there's someone there to help them out a bit more, as we can do here because we're on the ground. But it's really hard to say, you know, companies have their own reasons for choosing, and sometimes it's difficult. We would like to see the free trade agreement be of more use, to see more people take advantage of that. But we just haven't got there yet. So, you know, that's on our list of things to keep promoting. So we'll see how it goes. And the second part?
And the second part, actually, I was going to mention that our attendee, I think, knows the region very well, because the second question is related to your answer. And it says, if this lack of investment is due to restraints in trade locally, could this be offset by establishing a regional trade agreement which involves other countries in the Central American region?
I've been in Costa Rica 2 years, so I'm fairly new to the sector. Before that, I was in the Middle East, so I'm not up on it all. But my understanding was that years ago, back a few years ago, there was the intention to create a free trade agreement with Central America. And for whatever reasons, it didn't happen, and therefore Honduras decided to go with a bilateral agreement. Obviously, a regional agreement has advantages for things like crossing borders and movement of people and goods. And, you know, that's something we see in North America that happened when we signed the Canada, US, Mexico agreement. Of course, that made things easier for all three countries to have a bit more freedom of movement and opportunities. So yeah, I think that was the intention when we started at that original agreement back in the day, that we thought there would be advantages to having a regional agreement versus strictly bilateral. But I wasn't a part of that at the time, so I'm not sure what happened that we changed our mind on that and went bilateral. Would that ever change? I have not heard any rumblings recently, but you know, things change in the future. Who knows where the opportunities for something like that will happen.
Thank you, Ms. James. We have another question, and it's in Spanish, but basically they're asking about what are the main cultural differences between Canada and Central America that are important to consider or relevant to consider by Canadian citizens when trying to invest in the region?
Carolina, do you want to grab that one as the ambassador?
You can compliment, but one of the point that was made by Tammy is the people-to-people engagement, right? I think Tammy said, you know, it's very unlikely that you'll get the answer that you want if you just pick up the phone and cold call. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of developing relationships, speaking of families, and really get to know your interlocutor. So that would be my first recommendation, is the time that needs to be spent on developing individual relationships in order to grow your business opportunities and investment, and really also talk to different people, right? So lots of different views on how things are going, and so really make sure that you do your proper due diligence and engage with different people in the market that you're interested in, would be my first point.
I believe Mr. Firla wants to add something.
Go for it,
Sure,
Russ.
I'll add a few points. I'm completely in agreement with what Ambassador Gay just mentioned. I would also suggest that things, even in entirely private sector transactions, tend to move a bit slower. So for businesses, for investors who are looking at the market, I would counsel a fair bit of patience. You know, that things don't seem to be happening quickly or in the moment doesn't mean that there isn't interest. It's just that things take longer and decisions are taken slower. And a bit of flexibility in that would be is important. So that, I think that would be my biggest takeaway, and that's my biggest counsel to some of my clients.
Mr. Siguen, I think you wanted to add something, or was I mistaken? Maybe I interpreted your camera movement.
No, I'm 100% in de acuerdo with what my colleague have said.
Wonderful. Then we can move on to the next question. And the next question is, due that Canadian investors prefer to have local partners when investing abroad, or are they usually invest without such local participation? So do they look for accionistas or business partners in the region, or do they venture themselves all alone?
I'll say in Costa Rica, it's been pretty much, you know, solo investors, if you will. They aren't usually partnering. They're usually opening offices on their own without a local partner. I would say also looking at the investors we have in the other countries, it's similar. They're not necessarily looking for a partner. They're not against that, of course, but they feel pretty confident to be able to come in and start their business as a unique entity. I'm not sure about other countries.
And that has a good point to it and a bad point to it. First of all, you know, the paperwork and the red tape maybe is not that hard for them to navigate it by themselves. And the bad part is maybe the cultural differences make it difficult for them to partner up with a local person, right? So yeah.
Exactly. And we're always making sure they find a local law firm or someone who can help guide them through. As I mentioned, CINDE, the investment agency here in Costa Rica, we had a meeting with them a few weeks ago, and they offer a lot of guidance. So there are resources out there for companies who want to come in, and the embassies, all of our embassies, can help point people in the right direction if they're feeling lost. So they just have to come and ask for help, and we're always happy to do what we can.
Okay, and I'm guessing based on your answer, you know, these promotion agencies, right? Investment promotion agencies help out a lot, and we know, and our speaker will speak about this new agency that has just recently been created in Panama, right? We have another question over here. It says Canada has important construction and important construction industry. Do those construction companies have invested in the region in infrastructure projects?
I would say for in the case in El Salvador, they were 20 years ago, right? There's been some big bypass that were built by Canadian construction companies. In the last few years, there hasn't been presence. Interest, yes, as I've said, because of the ambitious plan that the government has, but nothing concrete has developed. So there's a historical presence, but not necessarily a recent one in my case.
Maybe I would just add to what Carolina just said, and I'll let my colleagues speak also, because the question also raises an issue, conversations that I had with colleagues in El Salvador specifically a few years ago, when they have this trade fair related to construction. It's called Constru Expo or something like that, if I recall, Carolina. And we were trying actually to bring Canadian investors, businesses in the construction sector to be present at this fair, to showcase their services, the work that they do. And it was actually very difficult. There were some that were interested, maybe they were present in other countries, but not in El Salvador. But I think the point there is, as Carolina just said, there is an interest. It's really to bring them, to showcase their expertise, their work, their services. And I think some of those fairs, I'm mentioning El Salvador, but there's also these fairs in other countries. And I think these can represent, whether it's in Central America, there's also one in Miami, where a lot of the companies doing business in Central America go. I can't remember the name, but there's these fairs as well that are opportunities for investors, for businesses that want to make those linkages, that want to showcase their expertise to participate. So I just wanted to flag that, and I see that Tammy wants to contradict me, maybe.
No, not at all. I think Canada no longer has as many of these big companies who will come in and build you a highway from start to finish. We don't tend to do that kind of thing so much anymore. We have companies who come in and they collaborate with a lot of SMEs who play like it's like a consortium, an unofficial consortium, and a lot of them are doing it through CCC because that adds an added layer of security to the company. RFPs come up and it's expensive to bid. People think, well, you just submit a bid, but there's a lot of work and man hours and documentation and papers. And if a company is spending, $500,000 to submit a bid for a big project, they need some kind of, security that this is not just money thrown away. So I think using CCC, more Canadian infrastructure companies are looking at our region and globally, but we don't have these big companies like some countries like China, Korea, India have, who will come in and do, turnkey operations from start to finish. That's not really the Canadian style anymore. We do things a little differently.
Okay. Regarding the previous question, which asked about
I'm sorry, Ambassador Ortiz, I think, wants to add something.
Yes. Oh,
sorry, Ambassador.
No, sorry. Thank you, Mariana. No, if you allow me, very brief. Well, thank you. Following the comments of Ambassador Carolina. Thank you, Carolina. Apologize for not mentioning you at the beginning of my presentation. I am aware of your excellent work through my colleague, Cisneros, the ambassador here, and and the excellent comments by Tammy and Mr. Ross and Mariana as well. Talking about the investment, construction, and infrastructure for companies in Central America, from Canadian companies, you have mentioned one important role that can be played by CCC, but we have to rearrange and find out in our region, that legally in Costa Rica is one of the countries that finally was legally is viable to reach government to government agreements between CCC and our government to create and develop constructions, investments and projects. That is very important for Central America to get closer with CCC, to make sure that the projects are done properly with quality and that is corruption free, which is very important for our region. And we have to say it very clear. Besides that, Canada have a long experience, one of the longest experience and more experienced countries in public and private agreements, P3s. And so that's another opportunity for our region. I will wait for the comments of Tammy or Ambassador Carolina or Sebastian or Mr. Ross on the areas of Central America for the public-private agreements, the opportunities for construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to what the ambassador just mentioned.
I'll just say we're working hard to get the authority for CCC to be seen as a legitimate contracting mechanism. So hopefully we'll get that soon. And I think once Costa Rica sees the advantages of using CCC, as the ambassador said, corruption-free, on-time guarantees, high quality, I think they'll be sold. We just have to get that first foot in the door.
And just to add, Embajador Ortiz, thank you. On P3s, absolutely agree. And it's something that we as missions in Central America have been promoting quite a bit, given the expertise that we've had, right? 25, 30 years of experience in P3s. And to add to what Sebastian Seguin was saying about congresses or forums that might be of interest, there's a P3 World Congress every year, I think, in Toronto. And part of our work has been also to promote delegations coming from Central America to that Congress in order to share expertise, present CCC, present what we have to offer. And so more work on that in that regard is in the pipeline for all of us, I'm sure.
Thank you, Ms. Gay. And before we move on to the next question, Mr. Hamill mentioned regarding our previous question, which asked about whether Canadian investors decided to venture on by themselves into the Central American region, or if they partnered up with a local company or person. He mentions that in Guatemala, large Canadian investors came to the country through M&As, merger and acquisitions, right? Particularly in the telecom sector with TELUS, mining, and retail. So yeah, that is a very good point for our audience to take into consideration. And then moving along to our next question is, in the tourism sector, many Canadian tourists are traveling to Central America and Panama. Do you also expect Canadian investments in tourism particularly?
I'll speak. Costa Rica is tourism central. We have a lot of Canadians come to visit us or live here. We have not seen much interest in investments in the tourism sector. I think it's seen that in Costa Rica anyway, the local, industry pretty much they know what they're doing, and I'm not sure there's they don't sort of need Canadian expertise in tourism. Certainly in Costa Rica, they have that down to a science. Other countries, we have not seen that. Investments in tourism, but the airlines are happy to fly Canadians down and Central Americans back to Canada to experience maybe some snow for a change.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think it's a similar case in Panama, although the tourist industry here is much smaller than it is in Costa Rica. It took a very big hit over COVID. I think new investments into the sector will take a bit of time before, to see a recovery in the sector before they'll revisit it again. But there are charter flights. Air Canada, I assume will resume flights at some point, as well as Copa, the national airline of Panama, flies regularly to Toronto and Montreal.
Same for El Salvador, just to say we have a few Canadians that have built hotels, small scale for because that's what they've done, but nothing large scale. And there's lots of potential to increase tourism, or probably on the lower number of Canadians coming every year, but there are charter flights. Air Transat is flying, and I think understand will resume flying post pandemic in the next few months. So opportunities there, but again, as like the rest, they're nothing large scale.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Seguin. Thank you, Ms. Guy. Thank you, Ms. Ames. Thank you, Mr. Firla. Thank you, Ambassador Ortiz, and thank you all for participating. That was extremely interesting.